Hi, welcome back to Soul Talk with Dr. Stephanie and Jessica. This is a space where we have honest conversations, most of the ones that we never get to have with our families. It's about energy healing, alignment. It's about the quiet wisdom that we all feel inside ourselves and the wonderful knowledge that we can share with all of you. So each week we look at stories, beliefs, and the patterns that shape our lives. So I'm Dr. Stephanie Johnson. I am a medical intuitive, a mind body coach, as well as a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine, and the creator of Soul Wise Method. I am here with my co host, Jessica, who is a Reiki master and an inspiring entrepreneur. And each week we sit here connecting with you, just having conversations that you might have with your girlfriends sitting around. And that's what we do each week. So we hope that you'll join us. And last week we were talking about the stories that we inherited. And this week we're going to take it a little bit further and we're going to look at it from what patterns and stories do we inherit from our ancestors?
Because, I feel that within our personal life story, there's not a lot of attention on besides the genealogical ancestor line, right? Our tree that we made in like third, sixth, eighth grade, right? To show us where we came from, but more so about the actual patterns that are influencing us today, the stories that are influencing us today that we're not necessarily aware of. And so today we really wanted to bring shine some light on those stories. And I think that both of us can say this and agree to it, that when you start to notice these stories, then you can really it's almost like then the picture gets a bit more vivid, a bit more bright, a bit more understanding within your own personal life experience.
So I think part of that is really about looking at what are the actual patterns of our thoughts, our behavior, and what's been passed down from one generation to the next. I think about it as a blueprint. And what does that blueprint look like? And how do we get to change that blueprint, right? And how do we stop repeating the same cycle over and over again? And so we're going to talk about some of those loops and where they might have come from and how hopefully we'll give you some practical ideas of how you might be able to stop those repeating cycles.
That's right. It's like, I love that analogy about the house. It's brilliant because, often it feels like uh, you can kind of feel like a stranger in your own home, right? It's kind of like I stick to this path through the home, right? I'm just going in this direction. I don't ever really go over there. I don't really ever see, or, that's just too much and overwhelming for me. It's so cluttered, et cetera, right?
And I
So you
think that
avoid
when
it.
you look at,
Mhm.
like that whole house analogy, it it is like you don't go into that one room because that's your junk room, right? Or it's the storage closet where you keep all the crap and you can't see underneath all of it. And so it's like, oh, what's underneath that? What's behind all those boxes? And what's the wiring? What's the structure? What's the foundation there? And then you realize, oh, I thought I built that from foundation, but actually that came from someone else. That came from my grandmother, my mom, my dad. It's not my own stuff, right? And I
Mhm.
think that sometimes we're living inside something that was built decades before us and sometimes generations before us.
That's right. And that's why I feel like it can be so confusing for us, right? We're walking through our life, we're making choices, we're reacting to things. Like there's this concept of this invisible map. Like, have you ever felt like you're walking a path that feels strangely familiar, even though you've never actually been there? This is our invisible map. This could be our ancestral patterns. And then we have the recognition, right? Once we're like, that doesn't sound weird, or that feels strange. It's that aha moment, right? When you see a specific gesture, Like maybe the way you clench your jaw when you're stressed or a specific worry, and suddenly you see your mother or grandmother in that exact same energy. For me, full on, right? Like
Yeah,
there
well,
are
and it's
so many
also that moment that the question starts to come in, like, is this actually my stuff, or is this something that I inherited? I
right.
mean, I think that's
Exactly.
really the core piece of it all. And
Mhm.
I think the other piece that I find interesting as an acupuncture is that it's not just emotional, it's this physical piece where we used to think that the DNA in our body and everything was fixed. Like it was something that this script couldn't be changed. But now I feel like through epigenetics, uh, we've learned that experience can shift it and leaves an imprint, whether it's trauma, stress, even resilience. Like, this is how our body then responds and then shapes how we then show up in the world. It's not just eye color and hair color or body shape that we inherit, it's also the nervous system, it's the ingrained beliefs that were preset before we even had a cognitive awareness. So it's not just something we learned, it's something that's ingrained within the cellular body. And so we just keep carrying it, right?
And that's I love that. Again, you with the analogies on fire today. Carrying it, I use that quite a lot too. I, a couple years ago, recognized how much I was actually carrying, right? And it wasn't like I was like, why am I carrying this? It was like, why am I like this? There was a lot of self judgment. There's a lot of that, God, I always do this. And oh, I can't ever handle that. Or why can't I do this? Or what, like all the different, internal negative self talks. And that, yeah, it's the recognition. I mean, we'll just say that's probably our key word for the day, right? It's
Yeah, right?
recognition of not what why am I like this, but more so, why am I holding this? I
Mhm.
mean, our bodies are vast data centers, right? They are filled with so much information, not just on the actual physical world, but of course, if you think about, if you believe in the aspect of the soul, like the way my mind and the way my heart feels it is that my soul is actually huge. It's massive. And I'm just this little 5'1" meat suit. So it's like the soul comes in and animates me, right? But all of that is like each aspect of the human existence that's all information. We are really taking it, we're receiving it, we're perceiving it, receiving it, and then we're like translating it, right?
I think it's
The receiver.
also vital to remember, like you're talking about some of the, how you felt, right? And the not enough and things like that. But I think it's also important to remember, like, it's not just the trauma that we inherit, right? Or all the bad stuff and the limitations. We also inherit this incredible grit and resilience and determination. And it's these survival mechanisms that actually have allowed our lineages to continue. And without that grit and resilience to overcome some of these obstacles, then we wouldn't be here. I think for me, what is so powerful is that we are the result of people who refuse to give up. And if you look back through time and some of the horrific scenarios that they had to get through in order for us to be right here, right now, and this present moment, those ancestral echoes, as we both like to call them, like they're still there. Like I can feel my ancestors behind me saying, "You got this, girl. You got this. Like you can do this. Don't give up." We didn't give up. You
Mhm.
come on, you have so many more resources and so much more available to you. So dig in there, girlfriend. Like get in there, girl. We got ya. So I think that's like one of the biggest things is, like how do we stop judging ourselves, right?
Kindness and compassion.
Right.
It's like that's how. Let me tell you, at least that's how it's been nice. It's been working for me. um, and I'm curious what talking about that, right? Because yeah, the resilience piece is so huge, especially considering, what life was and what opportunities were presented, say, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, right? Compared to today. Do you have any, like, I don't know, do you have a story you'd like to share with us about that recognition,
I think one of the things like tying into that is how we judge ourselves for being hyper vigilant or people pleasing or the anxiety that comes from scarcity, right? And yet,
Right.
if you step back, in
Mhm.
certain ways, we judge ourselves for that and we consider those all negative traits or feelings or experiences. But I do think that that is actually an incredibly intelligent survival strategy, right? And that reminds me of my grandmother, which I think is what you were alluding to because I'd shared
Mhm.
earlier. So she had lived through the Depression in the early 1930s and then through two wars. And so, because of that, resources weren't guaranteed. And so she saved everything. And I vividly remember it was like 2019. My aunt and I were helping her clear out her pantry, and we found this bottle of ketchup in there. And we pull it out, and it's nearly empty, and it's like nasty brown, like all around, like, crusty around the edge. And we're like, oh, and well, we're like, we need to throw it away. And then we, jokingly said, oh, I wonder what the expiration date on this. And it was like 1976. And we're like, what the hell is that? And so, we tossed it. So my
Mhm.
grandmother happened to be there and she sees it. What's this? And she immediately grabs it and she's like, there's still some in there. I still use this. And then we're like, what? Like, it
Oh
was
my God.
1976. We're in 2019, Grandma. And she's like,
Right.
there's still some there. It's perfectly good. And so I
Mhm.
think that, wow, you're like, wow, right? Like it's just
Wow.
such a perfect example of someone who lived in scarcity, not willing to throw that out, even though what, I don't know, how many years old was that? 40, 50 years old? Who knows? 40 years old. But in that moment, you realize that it wasn't irrational. For her, it was
Mhm.
about survival. And having
Right.
ketchup was a treat. And then, that same pattern has carried on. And it doesn't necessarily fit where we're living now. And
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's really it. And it's such a familiar story, I think, to many people. I just know because you brought that up that my husband's mother and grandmother. My husband's grandmother was in World War II in Germany, right? She was a nurse. Yes, she was, part of the SS, but it wasn't because she was a Nazi. It was in order to stay alive. A lot of
Mhm.
Germans, and I think a lot of things that people don't talk about when it comes to the tragedy that it was World War II, right? That so many people got pushed into picking a side. Anyway, I digress slightly, but what I will say is that his grandmother was so very much the same, with all the expired foods and stuff. And she didn't see, there was no reason, there was nothing wrong with that. And then his mother now, in her 60s is very much the same. So it's like this. It isn't that they don't have the awareness, that they don't need to keep the stuff. It's literally like ingrained in their body. What are they carrying, right? They're carrying the
Mhm.
survival. And that's just, again, the amount of awareness that one has in order to say, is this still relevant for me today?
Yeah.
Do I need to continue to choose that? Mhm.
You
Um,
remind me of my mom because my mom in our basement had, several shelves just stocked full of canned goods in case and expired things that she was always pulling out. But she learned that from my grandmother because
mhm.
when she was growing up, there was a scarcity of food for my mom. And they didn't have enough food often. And so she grew up, I'm going to have more than enough food. The apocalypse comes, we're good, we're safe, we're going to go. But what worked in 1940, 1950, 1930, whatever earlier time was, doesn't necessarily work now in
Mm-mm.
2026. So the question is, how do we thank that pattern for keeping our family alive while also acknowledging that it no longer serves us, right? It no longer serves us at this moment.
That's absolutely true. And I think that really brings up then that us in this time of extreme abundance, right? In our world, in our society. I know there's still a lot of people that don't have homes or food or money enough to take care of their families. I'm very aware of that. But in where you literally can go on the internet and purchase something and it arrives at your door that same day, right? These overwhelming amount of abundance. I think that this is the perfect opportunity to, obviously all the self-healing of nervous systems and things for not just ourselves, but for the past. One, but two, to actually, once we start to heal, recognize that we can actually consciously choose to break that pattern, right? And
And it
that's
takes
something that
that one person, like who is
right,
that person, right? And who
right.
who becomes that person in the lineage that says, I'm going to be the cycle breaker? Who's the one
Mm-hmm.
that decides, hey, the buck stops here? And who says, I'm going to transform this pain. I'm going to bring more wisdom here.
Right.
And now, do you so I have a question for you. Like, do you feel like you're a cycle breaker in your family?
I I have to say for sure in my later years now, like in the Middle Ages, get out of here. But I do feel like as soon as yes, let's just go ahead and say yes. I have always been the one that's a little bit out of the mold, the one that's always doing something a bit off where everybody goes, is Jessica doing all right?
Yeah.
They didn't understand the things that I was interested in. They didn't understand how I could see from a very young age of like 13, learning about the astrology signs, right? Where I was like, are you joking? Like there's this random science that all of a sudden can tell me some very deep, details about myself that I wouldn't know. Like, how do you guys think that's pseudoscience? I don't get it. How do you think that? Right. And these are
Right.
the
Yeah.
the types of discussions I would have with my dad and mom. And I was grateful that they were actually open-ish. There's always a point, but open-ish to have those discussions of being like, before they go, okay, Jessica, that's nice.
Yeah, and just having that awareness that you brought something else different into the family. That was not something that was in your collective wisdom
Right.
moving forward. And as you delved more into that at that age, that began to shift something in you, right? And it
Right.
not only changed your life, it also changed your family's life, whether they realize it or not. And that change now is going to be passed forward or passed forward with your children. And
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things I've observed in my own self as being, I knew from a very young age that I was a cycle breaker. My mom had me at 17 out of wedlock. My grandmother had her at 19 out of wedlock. My grandmother before her had her first child out of wedlock. And the grandmother before that on the maternal line. So there is this history. And now, when we talk about out of wedlock, it's not, there's lots of people who have children that aren't married now, right? However, back then it was a real stigma and it was a
Right.
huge stigma and it carried a weight of shame for the person who was of the product of that love coming together, if you will. And so I made a conscious decision when I was younger, like I was going to break that. I wasn't going to have children until I was married, until I was in my 30s. Because for me, I wanted to give, it wasn't about being married. It was just about giving my children, I guess it was because it was about legitimacy and also giving them a longer breath of experience to live before they stepped into motherhood if they choose that. I wanted to provide that. And so that was one of the ancestral breaks that I made consciously for my family. And, when you are that pattern breaker, it doesn't necessarily feel so empowering at first. It can be quite exhausting. And sometimes it can really feel like you're just swimming against multi-generational tide that's just like, oh, sometimes it's a gentle wave and sometimes it's a tsunami. And I think that it's just important to begin to look at it. And so for anyone who's listening, ask yourself, are you the cycle breaker in your family? If you're not, who is that cycle breaker in your family? And look at them and perhaps ponder, hold your judgment, and observe and see how they're shifting the overall arc of your entire ancestral lineage. And it's a quite powerful place to stand in the world.
That's right. I mean, it's a great experiment, honestly, if nothing else. I've always considered myself to be, I didn't study science, right? But I've always, of course I studied. I just didn't get a degree in biology or anything like that. But I've always considered myself to be a citizen scientist. I hear some cool theory or I hear some interesting fact, then I'm going to go and I'm going to try it out. So I feel like when it comes to that, like that experimentation, that's what all of this is for the most part, right? Healing, as an example. Now, you could say perhaps in the Western model of healing, it's not so much experimentation because it's so well established, but there's this level of experimentation because you don't know if this medicine is going to work for you, et cetera, right? And I feel like when you are able then to recognize, to be curious about, to experiment with, and it ends up being that you get to heal a bit of yourself. Like that's the beauty of this whole ancestral thing is that you're not just healing a pattern within yourself, which by the way, give yourself 100 gold stars because that's amazing. Boom, boom. But you're actually like you are changing the vibration or frequency for your children and for the ancestors who couldn't find the words to heal themselves or didn't have the tools to heal themselves, right? I mean, we talk about this as ancestral healing, or I should say ancestral echoes, right? One of my favorite things to do is to go into a valley, right? And be like, echo, echo, right? I love that so much to hear it come back to you. I mean, it vibrates in this different way, even though it's your voice, it's slightly different, right? And I feel like that, well, first of all, echoes are frequencies, they are vibrations, it's sound moving, right? But the beauty of doing this work is that not only do you get to offer yourself true healing and future generations true healing, but through this work, you are able to invite your ancestors to take on the benefits of the healing that you have done, right? I don't know. I would assume, and I am not speaking out of knowledge, I would assume they also have a choice to say, yes, I'm going to do that. I'll join you. Or no, I'm good where I'm at.
And
Maybe,
see,
maybe
I
somebody knows.
hold that when we heal in this
Hmm.
space, that whatever up levels us, whatever heals like in my being, heals the whole line, and it up levels. So like everything we do that's positive and good has a ripple effect out through the lineage and lifts everybody up. And I don't know how else, like, because I hold that, our ancestors are always present with us. Like, I feel them all the time. Like, right now, like, I sit here and I just feel them all behind me. Like, yes, I feel you. So, those ancestral echoes, I feel like sometimes those are the whispers that you hear. All of a sudden you get like this brainchild idea that pops in and you're like, oh, where did that come from? And I feel like it's like all of our ancestors are like, we're holding you, we're supporting you, and we are rooting for you to do even better than we were able to do. We want you to have this beautiful life. We want you to be able to have the resilience, the grit, the determination, but then all the beautiful blessings that come with that. And as we heal whatever the patterning is within the ancestral line, within this moment in time, it reverberates backwards and forwards so that that is no longer the pattern. At least that's how I hold it. And that's, sort of my belief.
Which is actually, I mean, it makes perfect sense if you would think about it, because what is, if we just said an echo is a vibration,
Mhm.
what does a sound wave do? Right? It goes out on both directions in every direction, right? So of course it would have to. And I think that also then it makes sense that it would, when you said the ripple effect, this is one of my most favorite, concepts, because it's that pebble dropping in that pond, and you're the pebble, or maybe you could be the splash. Maybe the thing happened and now you're the what's coming from it. And I thought about that generally when I think about that concept, it's within the daily life, right? Within my community, my family, my community, and hopefully it's affecting those people that then goes out and that goes out and that goes, it just continues. So that makes perfect sense. I love it. And yes, I shall also in this moment adopt that.
Well, and I also think the beautiful part about what you just shared also about that ripple effect is it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be overwhelming. It
Yeah.
is it is by doing the simple task. So your child comes to you and instead of yelling because they're like, I don't, hey mommy, for the thousandth time, asking you to tie their shoe, right? Instead of yelling because that's what you heard from your parents, at least I did, instead say, hey, how can I help you? Or give me a moment. So I recently, my son has this habit of interrupting me when I'm speaking, and it just annoys me so much. And often, even though it annoys me, I give him immediate attention because I didn't get immediate attention when I was a child. So I'm very aware of that. But at the same time, it's very disrespectful for usually the adult that I'm speaking with. So, what I have now instituted just in the past week is Bodhi, when you need to talk to me, if I'm speaking to your dad or another adult, put your hand on top of my hand like this. That will alert me that you want to speak. And when there's a natural pause in my conversation, I will direct my attention to you so you can ask your question. And last night his father and I were talking. He tried to interrupt, and I said, Bodhi. And all of a sudden he remembered and he put his hand on top of it. And I went, oh,
Yay. It's
it's
working.
working. So that's an example of like patterning, right? How many times, I don't know, I interrupted my parents all the time. My mom would yell at me all the time. And so it's a pattern. And until we
Mhm.
create a different way of dealing with that pattern, it doesn't change. And that's a really simple way. We can use it as an adult. Touch someone's shoulder, touch someone's hand, whatever it is. I want to talk. Have a talking
Yeah.
stick. I have a talking stick here. I have a little, rain stick. I call it my talking stick. It doesn't have to be a huge moment. I think it happens in those small conscious choices. And
Mhm.
it's not, if we think of it as the ripple and the small daily things that we can do,
Mhm.
I don't think the human brain, most people comprehend the significance of how it's the butterfly effect, right? Small
Right.
things have huge impacts on
Mhm.
all lineages and not all, but everyone that you come in contact with.
Mhm.
So, like, I grew up in an environment where conflict looked a very certain way. Words were sharp, reactions were even quicker, and I just
Mm.
knew I wanted to do something different for my kids.
Yes, 100%. And I think that, well, I would say same, but different, because really it was not even the recognition. I know we spoke about this. Was it episode 2, maybe? if we didn't, let me just recap, or I will review or I'll share new. It's
Perfect.
that whole right. It's that whole thing of when mom's not happy, it's like this is how it was said. When mama's not happy, ain't nobody happy, you know?
Right.
And so this whole thing of like me, I have an older sister and a younger brother. So middle child, whoop, where you at? I, grew up with that and that understanding that we had to make sure that she was okay, and that's fine. I know I'm not unique in that saying. I know that lots of families had that saying too. But what I wanted to say was off of what you were saying is that it didn't actually occur to me until after at least a year after my son must have been at least a year old, right? Like it was definitely within, like it wasn't an instantaneous you're pregnant all of a sudden you start transforming into your mother, right?
Right. No.
Like no, at all. I would say even probably closer to maybe when he was 3 to 4 years old was really when I started to be like, oh my God, that was my mom's voice coming directly out of my
Mm,
mouth. Oh my God. Oh my God, I really shouted at him. Oh my God, that sounded like my mom. I didn't like it when that happened, when I was little and I was crystal clear. It was all this weird, quantum jump situation where it was like all of a sudden what came out of my mouth was full on mom as I'm looking at this innocent little boy, right? And then I transformed into that little boy, being like scared out of my wits, right? And then being like pulling back into my body, being like, what the heck? And then being like, oh God, I need a moment. And then
yeah.
it's like, honey, you need to stay right where you are. I know you're 3. You could probably get into a lot of trouble. You need to stay right there. Give me 2 minutes and I'll be back. Right.
Right. But it's in
But
that
that's that
moment. Like,
cycle.
how do you like
Mhm.
until you're in it and are if your awareness isn't there, like sometimes you have to be in it. And some people are just in it and they never have that awareness, right?
Mm-mm.
And sometimes you're in it and then you're like, whoa, like you just said, like you have this awareness is like, wait a minute, I gotta go regroup, kid. And I
Mhm.
think that motherhood, parenthood, oh my gosh, when you talk about bringing up all the ancestral bad habits that we learned from our parents, when you have
Oh, yeah.
your own child, it hits you right in the face, and you're like, oh, wait, I can
Mhm.
either do the same thing or I can choose differently. And for people who don't have kids who are listening to this, look, I think there were other ways, like within work situations or relationships, that you can see some of that patterning, right? And so, beginning to be like, why does that friend or why does that coworker respond that way? And this is how I want to respond. It's like taking a step back and saying, oh, where did that come from? And is that a
Yeah.
patterned response? Is it because I want to people please? Is it because I never learned, like in this case, emotional or nervous system regulation, right? And if we don't learn those things, we have to teach ourselves those things. And I know, like when my daughters were younger, I definitely, my mom, like, like just losing it because I was like overtouched, overstimulated. And this whole concept of emotional or nervous system regulation wasn't in the lexicon at that point. And it's only as I need to change the way I'm responding here and not be reactive. I need to learn how to be in more of a state of neutrality because they're not doing anything. It's how I'm responding. However, our ancestors, so much of their lives were a reaction to, a response to something. And so everything was reactive, right? So again, how do we repattern that reactivity and put it into neutrality? And the first step I say is beginning to have an awareness. And your illustration about your son and saying, hey, I know you're 3 and I know you can get into some shit here, kid, but
Yeah.
mama's got to take a break. So I can
Yeah.
regroup and come up with a different pattern that
Mhm.
hopefully is going to elevate you and be a more positive experience for your growth than what it was for
Right.
mine. And yeah, do we trip up? Absolutely. We're human. We're going to trip up.
A lot, not just,
Hmm.
we'll do it over and over as anybody would if you were, I don't know, say you're 12 months old, just learning how to walk, right?
Right.
It's the same thing. How many times do little kids have big, huge, just a static bruise that's here for a good, I don't know, six months to a year because they're working things out. And that's exactly it for us. And I feel like as we are talking about awareness and we are shining this light on, our patterns to bring some clarity, more so for our own self, so we can learn to be kinder to ourselves, right? To give ourselves more self-compassion rather than, why am I always like that? Right? Like, so when you do have these moments like that flash, like if I could have told myself back then, because of course I wasn't aware then, hold on. I did, I guess, the best I could, which was take a break, right? And then make that, okay, let me breathe and let me move forward. But it wasn't necessarily this recognition of, wow, these are ancestral echoes and patterns and all the things.
Right.
This is just legit survival. I feel if there's anything that I can say to help anyone else that might be in that current state of recognition, which is it's like the dawn, right? It's just slowly starting to get brighter in the sky, is like when you feel it in your body, like a flash or of irrational fear, anger, anxiety, just stop and say, and this has really honestly helped a lot. You can stop in that moment. And first of all, always for everybody and everything in every age, stop and take 3 grounding full breaths into our belly, all the way up. Slowly let it out. That's the step 1. And then step 2 is to look at yourself with your eyes closed and just say, hey, I see you. I know where you came from, right? You are a pattern. You were protecting. This was something that you didn't get the chance to grow, right? Here I am. I'm growing in it. So you can trust me. You can rest now. And most importantly, I tell myself specifically, girl, you're safe. We've gotten this far, haven't we? We've made it this far. And I know that our life has not been easy, but we have made it this far. Trust me. What's up, spirit guides? What's up, ancestors? Hey, everybody. Thank you all, right? I'm always thanking them. And then let me take it from here. You're safe, right? This is so helpful because instantly with those 3 breaths, that calms your system down. And then when I have these irrational fears, I don't know about you, but it's generally speaking right when I'm falling asleep, right? Trying to relax for the night and get into a nice comfort zone. Every possible fear, past mistake, regret, anything else like that is coming flying to the face. And my whole system activates. My heart starts beating faster, my pulse races, and it's okay, none of this can be solved right now because I'm laying down to go to sleep tonight, right? I see you and I love you. Thank you for being here. Your presence is important. Right now, it isn't. So let's put a pin in it and we can chat later and we can discuss all the things that you might be fearful of. And it's crazy that you think, oh, actually speaking to yourself internally is helpful. I don't know.
Yeah.
We are
One
such,
one in one of later episodes, we're going to actually talk about that internal dialogue because it does have a huge impact on us. And
Mhm.
part of what we're hoping by talking about the ancestral echoes is looking at really like taking a step back and observing your family and looking back through the generations. What is a behavior or a thought, an assumption that you've seen that's been passed down? So, was money like one of them is like, oh, we'll always be in poverty and there's a scarcity mindset? Or was it, oh, we've always been very blessed. We are blessed all the time. We have everything that we need. Was it that? Or was it, oh, I need to act a certain way in order for people to like me? Whatever the pattern is, it's so important. I say, if you notice patterns that have come down through the generation, that means it's not your stuff. It's not your
Yeah.
stuff. It's
Hmm.
baggage. It's not your stuff. So you don't need that. Like you can let that go. So what I encourage you to do, look at those things and write them all down. Write all those patterns down. And know, you know what? I don't need to keep this anymore. I can let that go. I can let that go. Because how you respond and how you hold space for those patterns and then how you begin then to release them or create little subtle shifts. Those small changes, as we said, they ripple out. And when they ripple out, then that's when you heal. And when you heal, not only does your healing impact you in this generation, it impacts a native tradition. We say it impacts the seven generations before and the seven generations after. So it does matter. And so just make a good choice.
Or, and well, there's this, you can say, call to action, you know,
Mhm.
our call to action is to bring awareness, right? It's
Right.
like that. I know we discussed it before, but it's that observation. It's that third person point of view. It's just observing where you naturally move into. And we are going to all have very different things. The one that we want you to highlight is which one do you think which one does this action remind you of somebody in your family, right? So then we can begin to identify the actual ancestral patterns
Mhm.
versus your lived experience patterns, because those are separate.
And
I
also
mean,
looking at the theme. So it's like, who was the strong woman in your family who never rested? You know, that silent male or the woman who marries above her station. So look at that. Like, I think about the strong woman who never rests. That was definitely a pattern that came through my family. And this past year, I've been really working to break that pattern because I'm a doer. I do all day long. And the past year, I decided I was going to stop doing and to learn to be more. And what I found is by stepping away and being, taking the time to rest, taking the time to enjoy my cup of coffee outside with the grass, beneath my feet and listening to all the birds, I am so much happier and I'm so much more peaceful. So, just pausing for a moment and seeing what rises up in you and noticing. And I have held that pattern my entire life and I've consciously working on shifting it. It involves a lot of self-talk. It involves a lot of me saying stop,
yeah,
put everything down. So,
absolutely.
notice what the theme is.
And I just want to bring in a little small anecdote. I know we're going a little bit long, but only because this popped up yesterday for me. And out of nowhere, my brother came over and it was a beautiful sunny day, a little bit breezy. We're laying I put the blanket out and I'm on the grass. He's sitting in a chair and we're chitty chatting about social things. And it evolved into talking about our mom and how, and then it is just like you said at the beginning. It might but just be this random light bulb moment that pops in, something you've never considered before. And I had my own story about my mom and her struggles, but what popped right in, so I have to think it's from you, thanks, Ma, was that her theme was justice. There was a huge need for justice. She felt that the world was against her in a lot of different ways. Being a woman in, growing up from from the 50s on, how much change in women and freedom have we experienced since then, right? So there was this whole thing of like, oh, it's not fair, and I need to fight to get justice for myself and for all the other women who are constantly being beaten down and da da da. I'm not, my father is not an abusive person. He's one of the kindest people in the world. It's in general that the world, that the society beat her down, right?
Mhm.
You don't get paid as much. Men get to tell you what to do with your body. You know, like I got my protest spirit from her. I got my be the change you wish to see in the world spirit from her. Those are the positive aspects of it. The negative ones are that everything was always unfair. It wasn't fair. And I had to work through that. And I recognized, like, wow, that's so cool that all this time, all this analyzing is like, just like bing. And I was like, wow, that makes a whole lot of sense. So, and I chose from that moment on, everything is fair, right? It's as fair as I need it to be, or it's as fair as I want it to be, or it's as fair as I see it, right? If we don't fight for ourselves, fight even, but if we don't move in the world with the energy or vibration that we wish to receive back, then, you know, there will be conflict. It is what it is, right?
And I think what I'm
Um,
hearing is it's really about claiming our power and
that's right.
stepping into our power. And when we
Mhm.
step in fully into our power as our authentic selves, then that fairness shows up because we're filling up the space. And
Mhm.
the more we are able to fill it up and be present to that, I feel like that gives us that right to claim the power that we all, God has given us, honestly.
And you don't, and here's the big thing, right? Let's say this out loud just so it's said, that we don't have to fix anything. We are perfect exactly as we are.
Mhm.
We are, it's like, you don't have to figure it out. You don't need to make this your life goal to now figure out and fix. It's really just start to notice. We are, our whole purpose of having these conversations is basically being able to share with our listeners or watchers, whatever, that all of this is possible because we are not some, you know, gurus slash, you know, spiritual beings. I mean, we are all spiritual beings having an earthly existence. Absolutely. However, we're not putting ourselves on this pedestal. We just are saying that we've done this. We've started noticing. Uh, we've recognized, wow, that seems familiar to me, but it doesn't feel true, right? What feels familiar, what feels true. Through all of these things, it's kind of like we get a menu. We're sitting down to eat, like we get a menu to choose. But once we start noticing, we can create that list and we can say, yeah, that's not true anymore. I can take that off. This is absolutely true. I want to put more energy and love into this blank, right? So it's this whole thing of awareness, awareness, awareness.
So, as we wrap up this episode, what we want you to remember is you are allowed to honor where you came from, honor your ancestors, and you can still choose something different. The biggest thing is you have tools that your ancestors didn't have to create a better outcome. And, that's really about evolution. And so, if
Absolutely.
you're the one who's breaking the cycle in your family, we see you, okay? We see you. We see it's a big work. And remember, you don't have to do it alone and you don't have to do it all at once. Just notice first, you have to have an awareness. And from there, see what happens. So, some questions for you to reflect on this week. So, get your
Yay.
trusty journal
Got my
and
pen.
your pen. And I always mispronounce pen, but it's
Pen.
PEN. So, anyway, what pattern in your life might not have started with you? So, what pattern
Mhm.
didn't start with you? Might be one, might be 20, who knows? Write them down. And what would it mean to be the one who ends that pattern? What would it look like? What would it mean for your family? And if you don't have like your own children, it doesn't matter because whatever you do, whether you have siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, you observing and noticing it will also help that extended ancestral network because we're all
Absolutely.
interconnected. We're all one.
Yeah.
So if something stirred in you, just stay with it. You don't have to figure it
Mhm.
all out right away. Just start
And
noticing.
also, that's absolutely it. Just to pop into is if you feel and if you notice it and you feel activated, right? Like, and you feel uncomfortable or you feel fear or any of the, I put them in the negative category, right? That's okay. It's all right. Let's remember our three breaths. Let's just remember the three breaths because in that moment, recognizing, wow, if nothing else, honestly, high five yourself because you're like, dang, I recognized it. I also recognize that it don't feel so good up in here. And so there's this whole possibility to be able to work slowly. And this is not a race. This is not a marathon. This is not a sprint. It's a marathon. So take your time. And also, everybody's going to get a gold star at the end. So you are not fighting for first place.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So stay curious, stay open, and keep listening to the wisdom within you. This is Soul Talk.
And thanks so much for joining us. See you next time.